It's great to have another session with you all and to have a bit more time to talk about what I was briefly introducing in my keynote. I think I'll get started. I think we're a little past time, so I'll jump right in. So some of these slides will look a little familiar. They're just in now the Linux Foundation branding, but as I mentioned, I'm a senior researcher at the Linux Foundation. I joined in October of 2022, and I've had the pleasure of working on, actually that slide's wrong, it's now 7 research reports. We've published a few recently, and in previous roles, I have also completed research in more in the healthcare and data management space. My background is in public health and heuristics and behavioral decision making. I've also done some healthcare-related research at the Linux Foundation. I've done some blockchain research with Daniela's team, the Decentralized Trust organization. And I'm located in Canada. QR code links to my LinkedIn, and happy to connect on LinkedIn and after the session today. So what is LF Research? As I mentioned in my keynote, we were founded in 2021. And I think a main reason for starting a research arm at the LF was we hear anecdotally how important open source is from a business perspective, a policy perspective, a technological perspective, but we didn't really have the evidence to back up why, for example, a CEO should follow up procurement into an open source technology, why government should be using open source. And so we were founded as a way to build out that repository of insights. And so as you can see on the slide here, we have a few different kind of missions and ways of thinking about research. I think the big one that I always find when I'm conducting research or I'm working on other research projects is that demystifying piece. People don't really know what open source is if you're not baked in the space, and so giving that evidence around why it's so important and valuable has been a critical part of our work. We run research on a few different frameworks. So as you can see on the slide here, we have produced research in a variety of different technology domains. As I mentioned, I've worked on blockchain research. I'm conducting quite a bit of research in the AI space. We've done networking and edge. We've looked at the Linux kernel. We also look across industry verticals. So as I mentioned, we did research into the healthcare space and data management in healthcare. We've worked with the LF Energy team. We've worked with the Finos team, the financial services sector. We also take a geographic approach, and so we have research that we recently published that we call our World of Open Source series, and so we look at trends around the world in open source priorities and adoption rates and investment levels. And the global perspective was just published. Our Europe report was published a couple months ago, and Japan will be published in December, and hopefully a Korea report next year. So geographic lines, and then we also take an ecosystem approach, thinking more around kind of our tech talent reports, where we're looking at what's going on in the broader ecosystem across technologies, across industries. And so kind of a last slide on LF Research. What makes us unique? I've been doing a lot of work lately that are literature review based, so I'm looking at what's being produced in this space right now, and there are of course some really important labs out there doing work. I'm thinking Frank Nagel and other kind of Mozilla and other foundations that are doing open source research, but we are quite unique in that we are building out, as I mentioned, that repository of open source insights. And so doing this kind of work, I'm realizing just how much our research is adding to the space and providing evidence for individuals such as yourselves who are looking for data to back open source. And so we work with various Linux Foundation members and projects on different research questions that they have. And I wanted to get into 3 of those projects today. I mentioned them in my keynote. I'd like to give a bit more of a deep dive into these and how specifically we collected Korea-specific findings in this research project, and sorry, I tend to hold the mic far away from me, so I'll hold it a bit closer. How the Korean ecosystem and Korean's open source AI could really benefit the economy, the workforce, and the society. So again, this will be a little familiar from the keynote, but we know that AI presents immense potential to economies around the world. We have, the 2024 PwC report. These are all from our recent research we published on the global insights on open source AI, and we found that global GDP will rise 14% by 2030. We found one of Frank Nagel's research reports out of Harvard. They studied developers using GitHub Copilot, and they found that 90% of developers are 55% more are faster at their jobs. And then there's also, of course, a cost savings with AI. Organizations are experiencing quite significant cost reductions by incorporating AI into their workforce. But importantly, how do we make sure that all of these benefits reach the areas they should be and are not concentrated within specific corporations, geographies, people? And so I've put up a few examples of, if we're reading the news, we're seeing stuff like this come out on AI. And I think getting a bit ahead of my presentation, but one of the key things that of course, we're finding in this space is for those that are not involved in the development of these large foundation models, that maybe those who are not in the English-speaking world, these models are not necessarily that well performing in these contexts. And so I think this is a really important thing for us to consider as we move forward, and also why open source and open models are so integral to moving this wave forward in an equitable way. And so these are the three projects that I'm highlighting today. These will look familiar from my keynote, but the first one is the research report we just published with Meta on the value of open source AI for APEC economies. This came out in time for the APEC summit that was taking place in Korea last week, and we wanted to assess the market and workforce impacts of AI and how it's impacting specifically APEC economies. And the methodology for this was a literature review. And then we also held roundtables in 11 different economies and looked at or heard from individuals on the ground who are using AI and are building out solutions within these local economies. The second research report that we recently published on this topic is the state of sovereign AI. This came out in August, and we wanted to understand how whether or not organizations are building out customized solutions, if this concept of sovereign AI is a trend, if it's a business strategy, and whether or not open source is important to this trend or this strategy. And so we feel this is a survey-based research report, and we also ran 3 webinars in a North American perspective, European perspective, and we also ran a webinar in Chinese with various Chinese stakeholders through the Linux Foundation. The third report is our State of Tech Talent report. This report we published back in May. We run this report with the LF education team. We've run it for many years now, and this is an analysis of what hiring managers are saying about their technical talent market, what they're looking for, what the priorities are, and in particular, we've started to address the impacts of AI on the technical talent market. Broadly speaking, whether what's happening to headcount in general, but then also a more detailed look at what's happening to jobs, duties, upskilling, things like that. So those are the 3 reports. All 3 include of course, the APEC report includes quite a bit on Korea. The Tech Talent report has some Korea-specific findings, which I'll go through, and the State of Sovereign AI has an anecdote from Korea. So first of all, the economy. How does Korea's economy stand to gain from AI in general, so not just open source yet? As I mentioned earlier today, there's a hugely significant boon to GDP from using and adopting AI. This is incredible. This productivity gain is relevant for Korea's aging population and declining birth rate. And different industries within Korea stand to gain from AI, faster discovery for our research and development, whether that's pharmaceutical or manufacturing. We see a significant savings for public services, incorporating AI into their kind of as a chatbot or into their processes. And then the semiconductor industry is, of course, a unique one, as it's the manufacturing, operationally, the manufacturing sector stands to gain, but then, of course, Korea's semiconductor industry makes it an important member of the global ecosystem for AI hardware. So huge benefits from AI, and then, of course, looking at open source AI in particular, how do we disseminate that benefit? As I mentioned in the keynote earlier, open source provides really significant really lowers the barrier to entry for AI. We have smaller businesses who wouldn't normally be able to compete, being able to adopt and fine-tune these models to be able to create solutions that are efficient for the entire Korean economy, and that kind of crowdsourced innovation means a faster time to market. We also have that ability to fine-tune. As we found in our State of Sovereign AI report, 82% of organizations are using and building customized AI solutions, and the priority there is to be able to have control over their IP and capabilities. I've included, might be hard to read. I don't know how hard that is to read. It's a bit hard for me on the screen, but I included this kind of anecdote we had from one of our webinars. Chea, who said that he had this example of a Korean company that built out a fine-tuned using, I think they were using Llama, I don't know if we say there, but they're using an open model and they fine-tuned it for a very niche specific thing that he said only 5 or so companies need this, but the ability to, as Jim mentioned as well, to be able to localize for a specific business need is quite critical, and avoids having to reinvent the wheel or building out a new model that is just for one specific purpose. The other thing I'd like to mention is being able to use open source AI is really important for dispersing productivity opportunities throughout the Korean economy. And so open source, this is from the APEC report, and we don't necessarily highlight Korea in this aspect, but having a digitally native population really allows those who are younger and who are interested in learning more about this. The open source aspect means that they can access these models and access learning opportunities, lowering those barriers to education and entry into the economy. So second theme is society. Again, how will the Korean society be impacted by AI in general? We're seeing, as I mentioned in my keynote, various sectors that are impacted by AI for various reasons. We have education sector implementing AI for building out precision education materials, AI tutors, and being able to, in real time, adapt education for example, special needs students. We also see AI being used in healthcare. There's the more kind of mundane aspects of it, like automating tasks that are quite simplistic and repetitive, but then we also see it, of course, all the way to diagnostics and to precision care for individuals, and so a huge opportunity for healthcare and AI. In terms of elderly care, as mentioned, Korea's aging population, this was a flag in our APEC study in the roundtable we ran in Korea. And so we found that AI presents opportunities around robotics and wearable devices, and also being able to monitor chronic diseases that elderly folks are faced with. And then finally, public service, as I mentioned, the huge opportunity in public service for automating, for example, visa applications, monitoring other applications at the government level, chatbots and customer support is of course a big aspect of Gen AI. And so there's basically every corner of our societies and our sectors and industries face really positive disruption from AI. But again, as I mentioned, being able to disseminate this opportunity throughout sectors that can't always reach this opportunity, these technological adoption, open source becomes quite critical. So as we found in our APEC report, the ability to use open source AI in the manufacturing, healthcare, education sectors, for example, those kind of top sectors, really helps drive growth. We see, not just in Korea, but in the entire APEC report, we found really interesting examples of different sectors using open source model like Llama and building out a solution that's very fine-tuned to that application, like pest monitoring in agriculture. And so open source really drives growth, particularly in sectors that are less resourced. And then the ability to inspect and fine-tune those models is really critical when it comes to preserving culture or language. We found in all of the research we're doing, we're in the APEC report and in other reports we're running in Latin America, and even in Canada, we're finding the ability to take open models and build kind of an indigenous language data sets or multilingual data sets to support those models or to support those cultures within AI, and to make the AI model more reflective of that culture is quite critical, and that can only really happen using open source. Okay, third theme of workforce. So this is getting more into our tech talent report. This first slide is external literature that evidence that we gathered from our study back in May. And so how is AI disrupting the Korean workforce? These are kind of more general findings from this research, but as we found across all of the work we've done, all the research we've done in the workforce, AI has quite nuanced impacts. It is undeniably a disruptor to the workforce, but that disruption is nuanced. We see significant exposure to automation. So in Korea alone, over 20% are projected to be exposed to AI automation. But as I mentioned earlier this morning, that doesn't mean that jobs are being replaced. It means more of a complement to those jobs. And so we're seeing AI being able to really increase productivity, of course, and leaving time for other tasks, as I think it was Dirk mentioned in the chat with Linus. We're bringing AI into the workforce as a way to free up more time to do more things, and so I think that that resonates from the research we found as well. We also found wage premiums for AI skills, so various research that's been done has pinpointed a wage premium around 20%, upwards of 25% for individuals who hold AI skills. What are those AI skills? I'm about to get into, but having that skill set and being able to, really, it's such a complementary skill to be able to combine it with other diverse skills, makes it a really critical kind of go forward aspect of upskilling and of training. So these next few slides are some findings from our tech talent report, and these are specific. I pulled these aren't public. I'm happy to share this data, but if you can see the very fine print, this is a sample size of 61. So these are our Korea-specific sample from our tech talent survey. And I'm going to go through a few questions. This first one here, we wanted to understand how AI will impact the overall headcount in Korean organizations. And we found that kind of the red is, of course, decreasing headcount. This is technical headcount. The blue, light blue in the middle is no impact to headcount, and the green is increase in headcount. So as just mentioned, it really looks like from the research we're doing and from other evidence that we found in our literature reviews that we're seeing a net increase in hiring. There is some decrease in headcount, but for the most part, it's actually having no impact on headcount for the next couple of years or increase. Again, from our Korean sample from the Tech Talent Survey, we also asked our survey respondents how AI is changing their technical team's work, what that change is looking like. And we can see here, in the small font, can see prompt engineering and reviewing AI-generated code are kind of the top new job duties that are coming up. And you can see lower down, the automation of entry-level tasks becomes less relevant. It's of course there, I think it's about 28%, but that prompt engineering and AI reviewing is a lot more critical for hiring managers, or at least at this point in time when we fielded the survey. So another question we asked, which new AI-focused roles are emerging? So not duties, but new roles. And we are actually, I think the interesting thing about these findings in this slide is that that governance and safety aspect is higher than prompt engineers. From kind of my own thinking on this, I think it's possible that there's an upskilling happening with prompt engineering, but these new roles around governance and ethics are just so new, and having to hire in from the outside for these as opposed to upskilling. That's just my hypothesis on that, but you can see a list of what's kind of happening in terms of more non-technical and governance and ethics related roles coming out. Another question we asked was, how does your organization plan to address its core activities in AI? And I just highlighted here, the light blue line is the leveraging open source frameworks, models, or tools. And so there's a few different kind of activities or practices in this list, but I think that speaks to 38% of our respondents in Korea are planning to leverage open source to address AI. And that speaks to kind of what we're seeing of its value in the workforce and for innovation. And so as I mentioned, given that open source is being leveraged to address AI skills or AI needs, we see these open source AI skills really matter. And we see this across our studies. I've included, I guess there's two here. Our global study in May on the economic and workforce impacts of AI and the state of sovereign AI. Both of those reports were quite clear on the value of open source when it comes to kind of AI innovation, at least in the next year or so. And we see that it is really prevalent in organizations' AI stacks. There is a kind of a lack of, from the research we ran in our Tech Talent report, we're seeing a concern around not only do we have enough people to run this infrastructure to be able to innovate, but do we have the right skills as well for people to be able to run these open infrastructures? And so being able to use these open source tools such as PyTorch or other tools means that demand will grow for individuals who can use these skills or who can use these tools and have the portfolio available to show their ability to develop. I also wanted to include another question here. What strategies does your organization employ to retain technical talent? So not only is open source important from the employer's perspective to be able to hire individuals that can code using open source tools or to develop using open source tools, but also from an employee perspective, we find that upwards, was it 33 plus 48? I'm not going to do that math, but a large majority of organizations, value or find that their employees really value open source, being able to have time to contribute and to contribute back to their open source projects. So it's not the highest strategy for retaining technical talent, but it was on the leaderboard, and I think it's a relevant one to consider when building out kind of OSPOs or other policies around open source. So finally, just to wrap up, I wanted to include a few of the recommendations that we developed for our APEC report. As you can see on the slide here, we this report has quite a few recommendations in it. We looked at the 11 different countries, but the kind of overarching recommendations that we have are for Korea that are on the slide here. And so you can see it's really more about building out those foundations for for data management and for data collection, but also definitions around licensing and supporting the infrastructure that is needed for open source development. We also see, it really starts, well, it doesn't, the value of a national vision or a kind of top-down vision is quite critical in these discussions and definitions in such a new stage of AI. And so being able to have a national vision that supports open source, supports procurement in that space, and also provides access to GPU and data and increases investment in these spaces is critical. And then being able to issue guidance on this kind of development and how do we still preserve our creative economies and our industries, getting the most out of the kind of productivity gains from AI, but still maintaining our culture and our creative expression. And so there's a lot of recommendations in this report. I think I have this. Oh, I wanted to also highlight from the report, we included a few Korean open source AI initiatives. There's the South Korean tech giant Naver released the series Hyperclova. This is an open source LLM in the Korean language. There was a collaboration between academia, government, and industry to create the AI computational resource sharing open source project. This was designed to address shortage of GPUs in Korea. And then the Kistes Kony, which was developed using Llama, which helps support research using AI in Korean. So just a few examples here. I'm sure there are many more, but these were the ones that were highlighted in our research report. So this QR code, I think it takes you to the State of Tech Talent report. From that page, you'll be able to navigate easily to the other two reports. I'd be really curious to hear if any of you get through at least the executive summary. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on our research. We're of course speaking as, we ran our roundtables and we spoke to Korean subject matter experts, but we are writing this research as, at least I'm Canadian and North American, and so hearing your perspectives on our findings is critical for us when we disseminate our knowledge we've developed. Again, from the slide this morning, we are planning on running some research next year. We'd love to, the Tech Talent report will come out again next year. We're also, as I mentioned, I think at the top of my session, we would love to do a Korea-specific state of open source in Korea. We haven't done that before. We've done, as I mentioned, Japan and Europe. But that's an option. The QR code links to our sponsorship page. You can also find me here or on LinkedIn, and I'd love to talk more about what we have on offer and what it looks like to partner with us. And that's all I have. Thank you all so much for attending my session.